Welcome to Share the Mic. This is a time for conversation between Black and white friends where we get to ask each other questions that we hope will help our communities better understand perspectives, create empathy for people of different colors, and be one more step towards eliminating racism. I'm joined today by my friend David Scott, the Executive Director of A41, a sports training and fitness 501c3 and ministry facility in the Glen Iris area of Birmingham. David started his professional career in banking at Service First, but recently left that world to pursue his passion in sports training. Welcome, David.
Yeah, good morning. Glad to be here. I like you said, I'm now the Executive Director of A41. It's an organization that's been really near and dear to my heart for about 5 years now. I started as a volunteer about 5 years ago as a sophomore in college. Got connected with the founders, grew, volunteered, gave, and then it was offered to me to the opportunity to lead it the beginning of this year, and took it.
Why don't you tell us about your background growing up in Cascade Heights, the area of Atlanta, and how you came to Birmingham?
Yeah, so from Atlanta, decided to come to Birmingham for college. I was 2013. I went to Birmingham Southern. I played baseball there 4 years. And then when I graduated, I was faced with a decision to either stay or leave. And I stayed, much to the surprise of many people, which is always a fun conversation to have. But decided to stay. I started working at Service First Bank over in Homewood in commercial lending, which is such a great experience. And really the only thing that would have taken me away from it would have been something I'm super passionate about, which is exactly what A41 is. So after about 2.5 years, at the beginning of this year, I took over at A41 and really just started to lead that organization. Was really passionate about it, like I said, for a while, and those passions really stemmed from trying to create a place of refuge and access for young student athletes in the area, to provide a comparable and even elite athletic training experience to people that for whatever reason may not have been able to access that. So access is the key, refuge is the key, sports is just the tool we use to do it. So,
oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So my first question for you today, David, is in regard to the talk.
Yeah.
Your parents surely had a sit down with you regarding staying safe as a Black kid.
Sure.
Tell us about that time and how it made you feel and see the world differently.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting the way you phrase that. For a lot of people, that is one moment. For me, it was more of my whole childhood, I feel like. It wasn't an actual talk, I would say, as opposed to many small moments and talks, as I put in quotes. But yeah, it was basically, it was built around who we're going to be as a family and who I'm going to be individually. For example, there are certain things that you can, or I guess more things you can't do, as a defense mechanism almost to say, these are the things that society has weaponized about our culture. These are the things that are just not going to be acceptable in our home. I remember, and this is a little bit personal, but a little strange.
Please.
Too. I remember the first day I got a do-rag. Do you know what a do-rag is, Libby?
Okay, I do.
I wanted to make sure. I'm sorry. I remember the first day I got a do-rag as a young boy. And it happened to be, and maybe this was by design, or I think it was a coincidence, but it happened to be around the same day that I started wearing tank tops as undershirts, more informally known as, wife beaters.
Yes.
I hate to, and that's a prime example of weaponizing something that, it's cotton, it's cloth.
Yes.
Much like a do-rag is, it's silk or whatever, it's a material, but we as a society have weaponized those things. And I can remember vividly, this thing wasn't exactly said to me, but I know my father would have wrung my neck if I were anywhere outside the house with any combination of those two things on. Certainly not both of them. And does that say anything about my character? Of course not. Does that say anything about my, proximity to criminality? Of course not. But in the eyes of others, it may. And as a defense mechanism, that was just not acceptable.
Right, and your father was protecting you,
Absolutely.
Of course, and that's why he would have beaten you to a pulp.
Absolutely, yes, and that ties into other things that I'm sure we're going to get into today. But I think primarily those things, among others, serve as a defense mechanism. My mother knows that within our home, those things don't say anything about me. They don't. And you could say that for any black kid across America. Those things don't. It's a manner of having an undershirt and keeping your hair dry from a pillow, or keeping your hair moist from a pillow at night, and keeping it from, getting dry. It has nothing to do with your proximity to criminality, as I said. But society would tell you otherwise. So that's an anecdote, from your question. But yeah, the talk happened. In many ways, in varying degrees and varying lengths, just about small things like that, about being safe. To this day, I do not play music in my car really loud. Now, I tell myself now that it's because I just don't like music very loud. Well, that's probably not true.
Right.
It's probably stemmed from something that was put in me as a very young age. When I pull into a place, and this is funny because a lot of my friends like to mess with me about this. When I pull into a place, I like to turn the music down in order to read, which intuitively doesn't make sense. But at Birmingham Southern, there's a police shack before you get on campus. There's a guard shack, and no matter how loud or how soft the music is playing, when I pull into that guard shack, it goes off. And that depends. It could be John Prine, and it could be Young Jeezy. It could be anything. But it goes off, and it's a reflex.
Right.
And so many things are like that, that have been ingrained, I think, in myself and in other black boys from birth as a defense mechanism. Now, some people have chosen that, I'm still going to be who I am, and I'm going to wear what I want, and go out in public and do my thing, and that there should be a place for that. I mean, you should be able to do that without feeling as though you're a target now.
Right.
And I'm kind of proud that is coming back a little bit. And again, I'm young, so I don't know if it ever went away, but I'm kind of proud that happens.
People are being bold.
Absolutely. And the thing is, though, it shouldn't have to be bold. It should just be you're going out and you're being comfortable. We've done the same thing to women. It's just not intimidating then. Like you go to whatever grocery store and you see a woman with curlers in her hair or bonnet on, and we have made that to be somehow like not okay, when it's the same thing. It's cloth, but you see that, and of course you think a certain thing about that person now, and it's the same. It's the same, and I would have never seen my mother wear curlers outside of our house as a child. I would have never seen it.
Nor mine.
Right, and not because maybe she didn't want to, maybe she didn't. But she should have had the license to do that.
Sure,
is the point I'm trying to make. So, again, another anecdote, but yeah, the talk regarding being safe happened a lot in varying degrees. Sometimes it was, you just can't do that, or sometimes it was, let's sit down and talk about why that's not okay, like why that should be okay, but to protect you, that is not
right
to happen.
So your parents were very open from a young age, and that's good.
Absolutely. And I like to think I wasn't a hard-headed child, but I may have been. I probably was. But it started so early that by the time I was able to have any sort of agency over my own personality or the things that I like and things that I've decided for myself that I like, those things were already ingrained in me. The way I speak, the way I dress, how I speak to authority figures, how I respond to authority figures, or how I am as an authority figure. Those things were ingrained in me so young to the fact, or to the point that I maybe thought that that's just who I was.
A little like being in the military from a young age.
Something like that. Yeah. Well, good. Okay. Yeah. And I guess I'll ask you my first question. So this one has a little bit of commentary to begin with, and you tell me if this doesn't make sense. But I find the dichotomy between life as a black man and a white woman, me being a black man and you being a white woman, seemingly we don't have really anything in common, right? But I think the one thing that black men and white women have, being in an interesting position that both can find themselves on either side of a systemic oppression, depending, of course, to varying degrees, but depending on the situation. And so my question today is, having understood where your whiteness and being female has impacted you, what do you think is the first step for oppressors in combating oppression? And again, if I can kind of color that for you. So, you being a woman, I'm sure, especially being a woman in a very professional, corporate. If you guys don't know Libby's very top dog in the corporate world. So I know you've had some sort of, or you've heard the microaggressions or dealt with sexism in the workplace. What do you think is the first step for oppressors in combating oppression?
So I'd first say that it's true. Yeah. Oppression is very real for women and for blacks. Sure. And, observing the similarities of gender and racial oppression can really help us to better understand and then work to change the norms. So, there are constant negative messages delivered by the media and our culture, much driven by the old guard, and I'm going to call that the white male establishment. Sure. We need to work to stop those messages as they can infiltrate the minds of those that are oppressed and hold them back. So in this case, women and blacks. So as an older female, I've definitely experienced systemic oppression, but I believe not even close to the level of my black brothers and sisters. So, answering the question is hard because oppressors may not be open-minded and not even realize or even believe that they are being oppressive. So a good first step, I think, is to get people to understand the oppression of others, which will hopefully lead to empathy. Ask probing questions as a first step, like, have you ever felt oppressed? And let them explain. Listening, really take in their answers. As they speak to those personal experiences and hear themselves and the pain they felt when it was happening, maybe they'll be more open to the parallels that can be pointed out for those that are oppressed via racism. Sure. I believe that sharing of videos, iPhones, phones, whatever, has caused many cracks in the armor of oppressors. With this cold and hard evidence, eyes have been opened, and the evidence is clearly, it's indisputable. Right. So, it opens the door to have these kinds of conversations. But some people might stay quiet because it's uncomfortable to talk about racism. There are many Black Lives Matter signs around that say silence equals violence. I'm sure you've seen that. Yes. And a saying that hits home for me is silence is compliance. And, we need to get vulnerable. We can't worry about what someone will think when we speak out. We need to speak with, and not to oppressors, with. And that means having uncomfortable conversations, whether it's at the dinner table, with our own families, with friends, coworkers, within the church, or even publicly in forums like this. We've got to be vulnerable and willing to talk about these issues. Yeah. But, David, we've got to do it in the right way. Sure. Making people feel like they are the enemy doesn't work. Right. Causing them to feel guilty and defensive is really an obstacle to change. Have you seen the YouTube video series Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man?
Is that Oprah's series? Mm-mm. No, it's not. Then I have.
It's Emmanuel Acho.
Okay.
And he just nails it. So I highly recommend anybody listening today Google that it's on YouTube. Okay. So I saw it right after we had recorded the first episode of Share the Mic. Mm-hmm. A couple of months ago, and I sent Mr. Acho a funny note that I was flattered that he had copied Share the Mic.
Yeah, how about that?
His show is brilliant. He is having those uncomfortable conversations with, I'm going to call them white heroes. White people idolize these famous superstars that he has had as his guests on the show. So to name a few, Carl Lentz of Hillsong. Do you know who Carl is? Okay. Matthew McConaughey, famous actor. Chip and Joanna Gaines. Do you know who they are? Fixer Upper. With their kids. And these shows are not attacks. Emmanuel does a masterful job of framing the issue with people we can relate to, and thus he creates empathy. 2 million people have now viewed that first episode. I looked at it last night. Wow. I've read a lot of really great comments on these videos, like this one. I'm 77 years old and learning something every day about my own prejudice and that of others. Thank you, Emmanuel Acho. So that's a YouTube video that is combating oppression. A 77-year-old person who admitted to their own personal prejudice is willing to learn and grow because of this show. I hope we're doing something similar with Share the Mic. People seeing black and white friends talking about these issues honestly in a non-threatening way, just talking openly and sharing these conversations with their friends.
Yeah. I think that's so important. If I can add anything to that, I'm very big now on the idea that you don't get to back someone in a corner and judge them on how they get out, especially as that pertains to the recent riots and protests, whether they're peaceful or not. Now, obviously, I personally am a much bigger fan of peaceful protests than others, but I also can't judge people on how they decide to get out of a corner. So my a message to white people that are listening to this or on this journey of hopefully reconciliation, if you do feel attacked or if you do feel as though these messages are hostile, I'd say look internally first. And understand that when someone says something to you out of pain, like they've been dying to tell you that. Like when someone, and that goes with
they are being vulnerable.
That goes with any any relationship. When someone tells you something with as much fervor and passion, and sometimes that hurts. In fact, it should hurt, I think. And sometimes those things are accusatory, and they should be. They've been dying to tell you that. Like there's so much back there. So if your first reaction is to be defensive, which isn't natural and normal, I would say fight that first, because that's the only. If it shuts down, if it closes you off, then we definitely don't get anywhere, and you just got your feelings hurt. Right? It's much better to maybe have your feelings hurt a little bit, but then continue to pursue reconciliation or some sort of find a way to get some sort of production out of it. I think both, like you said, I think both parties have a role to play in that. And it starts with giving the right message in the right way, but then also being prepared to hear a message that's going
may not like
not even may, but will hurt your feelings. So and that's part of being vulnerable, like you said. It's part of it. So
well, good.
Yeah.
So David, you are a most articulate speaker. Has anyone ever told you that?
No, never. Not once. No.
So I'd like to explore how that has played into your work life. Are there any questions or statements that white people have asked you in your professional career that directly gave you the impression that they thought the way you speak is unusual for a black man from the South? Really, in other words, tell us about any comments made by professionals or coworkers that were insensitive, racist, or led you to believe that this person didn't understand that systemic racism even exists.
Sure. So the short answer to that is yes.
I was afraid so.
Yeah. Almost so much. And this predates my entering the workplace. And my workplace experience isn't, even that long, but, yeah, this predates that greatly, and almost to the point where I can't even remember one specific time or phrase. But we know what they are. We know and part of it's in the question itself is that I am articulate. Well, compared to who? Is my internal rebuttal to that. But of course, I just go about my work day and try and forget it. And for the longest, and I say this shamefully, for the longest, I know it was meant as a compliment. For the longest, I took it as a compliment.
Right.
And that probably goes back to, again, love my parents. Probably goes back to how I was raised. It probably was, maybe I thought, maybe I thought I was special because of that, But yeah, there are plenty of microaggressions, small things that are, yeah, you speak so well, or you carry yourself so well, and compared to who is my internal rebuttal.
Mm-hmm.
And that I've never said it out loud, shamefully, but I think that would kind of put people back and say, oh, that's problematic. Yeah, it's
Good.
that's a tough one to speak to without. We really could go on forever.
Right.
And again, to bring a little bit more, shamefully, I've done this to you. Like I said, Libby, you are. When you meet Libby, everyone who if you haven't, when you meet Libby for the first time, Libby has piercing eye contact, piercing. And I'm significantly taller than Libby, but it does not feel like that when we speak, particularly when we first met. And I had to step back and think, why was I surprised by that? Why am I surprised that this woman is looking me dead in my eyes, speaking to me, and making me feel like whatever comes out of my mouth next better make sense and better and better be important. Because literally, when you look at me and you speak, it's like, I don't have time to waste. I don't. So don't waste it.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's great. It's great. And I think that's probably, I can guarantee that's probably contributed to your professional success. And I'm sure many men like myself, shamefully, were taken aback by that, at least the first time. And we have to ask ourselves, why are we taken aback by that? Libby has great eye contact compared to who? Right. And those things.
It's a surprise.
Right. And goes back to my first question about being a black man and a white woman, being able to find ourselves on different sides of oppression. Black men have a misogyny problem. We do. We do. All men have it. Yeah. Men have a misogyny problem that also needs to be addressed. Now, obviously, like you said, it's not always to the same degree. And, oppression doesn't affect everyone the same way. But we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that. Right. So, and that, I think, maybe helped me be able to see, that's not okay. The same way people ask or are surprised by my being articulate or eloquent,
yes.
If that's a better fitting word, I've done the same thing. And to you, I recognized it. And that made me think about every woman I've ever done that to. What happens when I meet a woman who is less impressive professionally than you, right? You shouldn't have to be this top dog for people to be surprised by your success or that the way you carry yourself, as that you have the success that you do. So yeah, that, again, another long anecdote to a pretty simple question.
I appreciate that.
Yes.
I have been told that once or twice before.
I'm sure. So I will go back to my second question. So the question, I'll start with that and then give you the commentary. So the question is, how do you feel you personally can combat workplace racism? And like you said earlier, silence in this day is really always, silence is consent, neutrality, acceptance, and acceptance is endorsement. And that's one thing I've had to realize when I was, when I'm in the gym, if we're playing music if we're playing music in the gym that's not okay, even if I'm personally okay with it, that's something I have to say, because if I accept it, I'm really endorsing it. Almost as though I'm playing it. So how do you feel you can combat workplace racism?
Well, I'm glad you asked me this because it's a passion for me.
Okay.
And, I think first you have to realize it exists. You can't be in denial. Companies are looking in the mirror right now and seeing the reality. And my company, we did the same thing. So, a quick story. At my own company, we took a picture of all the employees not long ago. And that picture just didn't sit right with me. There was no denying we had a problem and that almost everyone in that picture was white. It wasn't that our company was racist. We had actually had a pretty good track record in the past of having black employees all the way at the executive level. But we had lost people of color over time and would probably become complacent. I don't like that word. So we first looked at the data and the history, and we had become more diverse in terms of strong female leadership. But again, that leadership was really white. Yeah. So, we began to work to figure out how to bring more people of color back to our company. And we realized that it's not going to be easy. Our business is commercial real estate. It's a very white-dominated, male-dominated business. There's a very small percentage of female leaders. So, hey, we checked that box. We're doing well there. But there are far less people actually in our industry of color that are qualified to do what we do because they just don't have the experience. So we realized if we're going to solve the problem, we have to invest heavily into training. And as a smaller company, again, I'm just going to be real. It's hard to commit to spend that capital, especially with COVID, hitting our business so hard, retail, real estate. So that's the reality. So we've said we got to do something here. And so we've looked at how we can get started. And so we've come up with this team idea, IDEA, inclusion, diversity, equity, and awareness. So we're using basically a SWAT team of internal employees. Nice. We put together as diverse a group as we could to be on the team. And the purpose is to generate ideas and create concrete steps that will enact real change. So, we can't just say we're going to do something. We have to do something. So we're starting by having honest discussions about diversity. And, we're going to take it from there. What are those steps that we can go? And we've got lots of ideas. And it's going to take time. We realize that. But, first off is that our employees have to know that racism is unacceptable in our workplace. And that includes their own personal social media, anything that they might post out there publicly. And personally, I'm committed to use my position and platform as a leader to work towards bringing color not only to my company, but also to my industry, commercial real estate.
Yeah, it's really important.
So I get to ask you a question now. This is one that we're probably both going to answer and wrap up with. How do you think the church should be addressing racism? In other words, what changes do you think churches should be making in order to bring color unity to the body of Christ?
Yeah, wow, that's probably my favorite. That's probably my favorite question because I think the answer can be everywhere. I think the first thing that churches can do, or bodies of Christ can do first is lament, which is that's a biblical answer to it, a biblical question. I think lament, if any change without lament is superficial to me, because I get the question a lot from white friends and even white people I don't even know really well, but want to get to the bottom of this, is rushing to get to the bottom of this.
Yes.
Okay, so what do we do? Well,
it's like we have to have our period of mourning.
Thing,
that's what I think we've been doing.
So lament was described to me by a good friend of mine as a cry to God, mourning to God, and we have to learn. I would say, actually, white people have to learn to mourn with the mourners. I mean, any change that is enacted is it's all well and good, but it's like if you have a problem with your spouse or significant other and you just want to fix it. Well, do you want to fix it because you want to hear them stop talking, or do you want to fix it because you truly hurt for them? Mm-hmm. Like you truly hurt and feel for what you have done or what someone else has done or what has happened to them that is causing them to mourn. Are you mourning with them, and that is what is spurring your change? Or are you just tired of hearing from it? Like, you want your Instagram feed to go back to normal, or you're tired of hearing about it in the news, or things like that. So I think number one is we must lament as a church, and then two, really look in and see where your individual body of Christ or your individual church community has neglected those who are different. For a church in an all-white area to say, we're a house of believers for all people, what does that mean? You know what I'm saying?
It's pretty obvious, isn't it?
like, if you're not, you have to intentionally pursue finding and being a resource and being a community for all people, and not just saying that you are and still hiding in your corner. Because why would why would someone come to a body where it's not, where they don't feel at home? Even if you say, yeah, you can feel at home here. No, like, you have to take the steps to actually do that. And there are more, concrete answers than that. But I think,
in my opinion, there's no place more important than the church
Yeah.
that needs to exhibit love for
Sure.
people of all colors, shapes, and sizes.
Well, if we don't, then we're not the church.
That's
you know,
right.
and
It doesn't belong anywhere,
Yeah.
but it especially doesn't belong in the church.
Absolutely.
So, I read this book, or I'm just finishing it up, by John Perkins. It's called One Blood. And what an amazing man. I'm just so in awe of him. And he's 90 years old, and he has these very wise words for the church on love, forgiveness, and how God feels about race. And his main point is that there's only one race, truly the human race. All humans are created in God's image, and all humans bleed red. So we're all of one blood. We're just made of many colors and unique characteristics. And so, I look to that saying how wonderfully we are made and how beautiful that God made us all unique. Variety is the spice of life. And that really resonated with me. And I think it could be taught in every single church. I think we would be well on the way to the disappearance of racism if people would read this book, adopt it, meet in small groups, in homes, bring people to homes, form real relationships through that.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think just like you said, more practically, when churches, you look around at Sunday at 11 a.m. It's got to be still the most segregated time in America.
Yes.
I want to say Dr. King said that. So if that was true before '68 and it's still true now, then what progress have we actually made as a church? And I think that it ties into the Lamentations that I'm talking about. But then also, after that and even during that, the work to be done is there. Look around. Look around on Sunday mornings and you see a bunch of people that look like you, live like you, go to school with you, play sports with you, even have the same favorite hospital as you maybe. I don't know, like you're not doing this on purpose. At least I would hope so.
But you're being complacent.
And you're not including the entire body of Christ. And then that invites the question, do I actually see other people as being image bearers of Christ as I am? Because most people would say that they are. Most believers would say, yeah, I'm made in the image. But can you say that about your incarcerated neighbor, your addicted neighbor, your teenage pregnant neighbor? Can you say that about your lesbian neighbor? Can and those I think are the questions that we need to be inviting and then answer them honestly internally, and make the work starts there, because we can't if we're not honest with ourselves.
So, I have one other point on this, and we'll wrap up. So I have a friend, Dimitri Carpenter, who was my co-host on our first show, and he's worked within both white-led and black-led churches. And I think he really had great advice for church leadership right now, and that's that churches have to be very intentional, just like as my company has to be intentional about recruiting and supporting people of color in leadership positions, not just businesses, but churches. That's where it really should start. And, in order to have multi-ethnic congregations, white-only top leadership just doesn't work. It's a big opportunity to combat racism by investing the time and resources into people of color so they can be brought into those positions.
I think that's also an investment. I'm sorry, I could. This is another.
We could go on all day.
I think that's also an investment in the organization. Diversity and inclusion are not boxes that you check. Those make you better. That's just as diversifying an investment portfolio. It's a hedge against bad decisions. It's a hedge against homogenous thinking. It shouldn't be, well, let's hire this person because they're black and our company photo will look better. No, let's hire this person because not only are they black, but they bring an entirely different thought model to our company that we can use. Or maybe this person who is differently abled than I am brings a whole different, thinks about things differently than I can, and will help us make better decisions. That is an investment in your organization, not just in
that is so true.
People. So I think diversity and inclusion, if it stops there, like you said, it only works if you do it in leadership. If you invite not just other faces, but other voices and other minds to that table. Because it's not just enough to be in the room. You have to be at the board table. And in some, you need to be the chairman.
That's right.
In some situations. So, it's not enough. And you said this, and I'm just piggybacking off of it. Sorry. It's not enough to just be in the room, but
to have a voice, to have a vote, to be the decision maker.
And it's a positive thing. It's not a box to check or an asterisk or something that you have to do. It's something that you get to do. You should enjoy bringing that, because like I said, it's like diversifying an investment portfolio. You're in real estate here, and you're in pharmaceuticals here, and those are good. Like any financial advisor will tell you that. So why is that different when we're not doing it in the boardroom? So.
Well, it shouldn't be.
Yeah, it really shouldn't. So thank you for that. That's a really good point for that.
Good.
Yeah.
So we're going to close now. So that's it for today. Unless there are any parting comments you'd like to make, David?
Far too many. So I will stop. there. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you as my guest on Share the Mic. And to our listeners and those watching, please do just that. Share this post, video, or podcast with others so that we can keep this conversation front and center. Let's work together to eliminate racism. Thanks for tuning in. Share the Mic was recorded at E3 Studios in West Homewood, Alabama. Co-production, recording, videography, and editing are by Ronnie Gatry. Share the Mic was created and produced by me, Libby Lassiter, with the help of my many Black and white friends.